Hey, Eric.
Hello. I was just getting the notes doc.
Yep, I'm doing the same. A little bit unprepared this week. But that's sort of the case every week, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't have much for the operator this week. Guess we've never had an icon for Calico Heroes.
Never? You must have. No. Thank you, Chrome, for just suddenly crashing and failing to start. That's exciting. You must have had an icon. It's just, yeah,
Oh, no,
it's that little emoji guy with the cape.
well, see, does it not show up in the? I was scrolling back in the. Yeah, we never used it before. It doesn't seem like. We'll see it in the left-hand outline.
Oh, I don't know why it's not showing up in the outline, but it's there in the,
Well, I just added it to the latest.
but like
Unless.
June, you didn't add it to June 14th or
Oh
April
no.
12th. February 8th.
Huh. Interesting. Yeah, I see that now. Well, I guess the icon I picked does show up, if anybody cared.
Hello, Lance and Reza. So I think we don't have a whole lot to talk about today. We can talk about kind of whatever we want. Um,
Is there going to
328.
be a recording of it on YouTube? Because that would limit our ability to talk about stuff.
Um, I don't know what we would talk about that we can't put on YouTube, Reza.
I can think of a lot of stuff.
Well, let's assume that we are talking in front of our parents or grandparents or whoever holds you to the highest standard.
You're not helping the case.
Yeah, I realized after I said that that might not. Mm,
So you're saying I should expect whoever's looking at me to give me confused looks and not
yeah.
understand anything I'm saying?
hmm Exactly. Um, we can do a quick spin through status things. Um, I think the main one is 328, where uh Tuti's in the process of cutting that release. As usual, hitting some snags with it. I think we got as far as blessing a commit and then having it fail to build during our release build step. So that's a little bit odd and probably just points to a bug in our release scripts, but that's the latest I have heard on it. So hopefully we get past that and can get it out today or tomorrow. And that's sort of the main thing release wise. I don't think there are any ongoing patch releases. So don't have a
Not
lot
yet,
to...
but I noticed that Golang released a new version yesterday, so presumably that will result in patch releases soonish.
Yeah, usually does. Yeah, that's kind of all I got for 328.
I'm curious, Casey, did I know a couple of the things that were blockers for a bit were things you had worked on. We found issues with them. Is like I think there was something around the IP pool controller and the what the I don't know, something with labels on resources. Is all that like is that
I think what I'm hearing is, Casey, you introduced a lot of bugs. Did you fix them all? And
no, I'm wondering if everything that you hoped was going to be in is in.
yes.
Okay, cool.
So I can talk a little bit more about that. I think the stuff you're referring to is a few interactions between a few pieces of code that I worked on. One was the IP pool controller and the operator, which adds some new features around IP pool management, namely the ability to create multiple of them at install time, and then also to manage them through the operator API over the course of a cluster's lifecycle, instead of needing to switch to managing them directly. In order to do that, the operator talks to the CRD v1 API because it needs to be able to create these pools prior to the API server existing. And so that's all fine and good. There was another bug that involved duplicate UIDs between resources on our v1 API and our v3 API. And that's because the v3 resources are stored as v1 resources sort of under the covers. And yeah, I'm just realizing it's a long chain of, it's a domino effect. So we fixed that one so that the UIDs aren't the same. And that introduced another bug because controllers like Argo, CI/CD happened to be applying these labels in order to track which resources are owned by Argo. And just coincidentally, because the UIDs on the v1 and the v3 were the same, it treated them as the same object. Now that the UIDs were different, Argo was seeing two objects with the label on it, but with different UIDs, and it assumed that it was out of sync, and so Argo is never properly syncing. And so we needed to put in another fix to make sure that the labels were handled properly between these resources so that Argo only saw one object instead of two. And so we fixed that. And then it comes for a full circle because the fix for that involved copying of labels and annotations between the v1 and the v3 APIs in a sort of special way. and doing so broke the IP pool controller, which was talking to the V1 API and using labels and annotations in a way that no longer worked with this fix. So this holy trinity of issues was fun to deal with for a week or so.
And that's why you shouldn't use the V1 API directly.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, I fell afoul of my own rules there, but it needed to be done. And it should all be good in 328 and it shouldn't be a problem as long as you're using the V3 API. And even if you're using the V1, it should be fine unless you're using both the V1 and the V3, which I wouldn't recommend doing regardless of these bugs.
Thanks for story time.
Of course. Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's much to say on 329 because it's a long ways out still, and we're still trying to get 328 out the door. I have been working on the NF tables data plane prototyping and have most of our end-to-ends passing on that right now, admittedly with quite a few rough edges and hacks wedged into the code to get it to that point. But I think as far as the proof of concept, it's pretty all right. Sean, I don't know if you had a chance to look at how I had structured that so far.
I did skim it. Did I not say anything about that? That's
You didn't
possible.
say anything about it.
Okay. Dropped a few comments. I think it looked like there was a lot of handle turny stuff, which I was expecting.
Yeah.
And then there are a few bits you'd flagged as like still working on, and all the handle turny stuff, changing the APIs and abstracting things looks just what I was expecting. It kind of makes sense. I didn't dig into the details of the NF tables parser and all that sort of stuff yet, which is probably the chunky sort of piece that's kind of unique. So yeah, I didn't look at that bit yet.
Okay. Cool.
I think it slipped off my radar a little bit. I kind of did a first skim and then didn't come back to it.
Yeah, no, I think that's fine. I think the main thing I wanted was to make sure I wasn't too far off course in terms of interfaces and structuring and that sort of stuff. The actual details of how the table logic works and rule tracking and all of that. Like there's lots of shortcuts in that right now anyway that need to be cleaned up. So that's promising, and I'll keep plugging away on that. Starting to look at getting UTs and FVs passing. And then, as I go, I'm trying to keep track of all the optimizations we can make. It seems like conventionally for NF tables, a lot of stuff is done via these maps that allow you to specify both the match criteria and an action. So I think a lot of our chains can be turned more into map-based lookup tables. But that's probably phase 2.
You can put multiple actions on a rule as well, which is handy. Some other things we do.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, both of those marked down as future enhancements there. But yeah, I'm excited that it's passing end to ends and seems to be kind of doing its thing. I've been talking for a while, Eric. I don't know if there's any operator stuff you want to talk about, or if there's anybody else who wanted to call out 328 things.
Nope. Yeah, I really don't have anything that I had identified to bring up in this.
And I flag an issue.
Of course.
6160. This is VXLAN tunnels stop working when they end up with a borrowed IP.
Yes. I remember that one.
Yeah. So we've had a couple of Calico users hit this, and of course it's super confusing for everybody.
Yeah. Does anybody remember why it stops working with the borrowed IP?
I know why that is. It's because the calculation graph gives the two. It gives a tunnel IP a different type to a workload IP when it passes it down. So the block gets sent down to the data plane as a /26, and then any borrowed IPs get sent down to the data plane as /32s. And the borrowed IPs work fine if they're workload IPs, because we're looking out for anything of type workload to program. But if you have a tunnel IP that comes through, then it has a different type, and we just ignore it in the VXLAN root programming. So it's basically that. It just needs it just needs to take account of those tunnel IPs if they're borrowed as well. I think that's the
So would we want to introduce a new metadata field or something on that API between the calc graph and the data plane?
Yeah, we could do it as like as a thing that says this is a borrowed IP. I tried hacking something up. It didn't quite work. So I had a little bit of a work in progress on that one. But yeah, maybe I can finish that, or at least circuit round. So yeah, I think that's what I did. I think I added a flag that said this is a borrowed thing, so you need to program it, even though it's a tunnel IP, because we don't want to program every tunnel IP as a dedicated route.
Yeah.
We just want to program the ones that happen to have been borrowed. So that's where the slight complexity lies.
Yeah, and I guess the other option would be to have the data plane do a bunch of additional tracking to see if the tunnel IPs are within the blocks assigned to the node that. Yeah, but then.
Yeah, but we deliberately moved that calculation to the calc graph explicitly, so the data plane didn't have to have that complexity.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, I think it's a reasonably straightforward fix. It's not entirely trivial because of that detail, but yeah, just a matter of finding time for it. I had a small feature that went into 328, which is sharing of IP tables chain pieces. So this is good if you have more than 100 policies per workload, which some of our customers do. Instead of having 100 rules that say jump to policy 1, jump to policy 2, jump to policy 3, we now render a single chain that has all the jumps in it, and then a single rule that says jump to this kind of intermediate jump chain. And that means you end up with much smaller IP tables rule sets if you have lots of small policies on every endpoint. Helps programming times and stuff.
Right, so that's for when you have the same set of a large number of policies applied to multiple pods.
Yeah, and that's usually how people end up getting so many policies applied to a pod, because they have some baseline set of policy that they apply to everything. Or apply to everything in a namespace or whatever. But yeah, that optimization kicks in as soon as you have like 2 or 3 policies in a row that all have the same selector on them.
I noticed that in showing up in the NF tables rules too. And I made a mental note of, this is weird. This isn't what I was expecting to happen. But now I'm glad I know why. And it wasn't just me completely forgetting how things work. It's a new feature.
Yeah, it's new. Yeah, we had a customer that was putting 250 policies on every workload, and it was all the same 250 policies because it was like their baseline like network isolation policy for their whole cluster.
Mhm.
So that saves like 500 IP tables rules per workload for their setup. So that's quite nice for that, because you probably have 100 pods, so that's a lot. 50,000 IP tables rules we save in that scenario.
What version did you say that? Is that with 328 or was that?
Yeah, that's in 328, so that's coming out very soon.
Is there any crossover with Kubernetes? Is it an admin network policy, and is there a baseline network policy in there as well?
You mean does admin network policy and baseline network policy solve that sort of problem?
I mean, is that a case where you might end up with the same set of rules applied to lots of pods?
Yes, yeah, and as and when we do AMP and BAMP, this optimization should kick in for that as well.
Awesome.
Because the optimization runs on Calico's internal rules model, so whatever we map into that should get the same treatment.
Cool. Thank you.
Sean, I'd ask you to take a look at the meeting minutes to make sure I recorded that right. I'm not sure I got the gist right.
Will do.
Hi, Nisha. I didn't see you until just now. I don't think I've seen you here before, so hello.
Hey, hi.
Welcome.
This is my first time.
Great. Glad to have you here. Were there any topics you wanted to talk about or questions you had to ask?
No, I am very new to the Calico, so I am trying to pick the things up.
Great. Well, glad to have to hear it and to have you here.
Thank you, Casey.
Yeah, if you have any trouble figuring out what to learn next or where to find materials, ask in the Slack. Reza here is in charge of all of the beginners materials, for example.
Sure, I'll do that. I'm into the Slack. 1 minute, let me see. I'm just checking my Slack messages. It's Calico users, right? .slack.com.
It's definitely Calico users, yeah. Reza just put a link to the
Invitation. Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, definitely a good place to be. Most of us hang out there.
Sure, sounds good. That's all I have for today.
Cool. Not sure that I have a whole lot more to say today either. So we may just call it short at half an hour.
Okay. Nice to talk to you all.
Yeah, good to see y'all.
Bye, folks.
Till next time. We do it.
you.
What do we do? Second Wednesday of
next
every
time.
month. So June 12th. It's like the next one.
All right.
See you
Thank you.
guys.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.